The alien councillors gazed over at Commander Alan Bell standing alone at the far side of the vast chamber as they readied to pronounce humanity's death sentence. The human race had dared attempt to colonize a galaxy they had no right to, and now they would pay with orbital bombardment of all their worlds and fleets. Quasar, the Iridian High Counselor, swung a crystalline gavel as he declared the meeting open, his liquid-filled eyes pulsing with rage, eager to cut down any human excuse or plea for mercy. Alan stood ramrod straight in his deep blue naval uniform, adorned with numerous combat decorations from a dozen campaigns. He had strode into the council chambers only minutes before, medals clanking, to defiantly respond to the alien summons. The scaly and slimy alien representatives surrounding him had mostly seethed in hostility as he entered, although a few cowardly insectoid races averted their multifaceted eyes in awe or fear at the imposing human warrior. Quasar's booming voice echoed off the golden ceiling arches, accusing humanity of illegally invading the sacred alien world of Kepler 452b. Alan held up a gloved palm, projecting his voice to easily carry to the back rows. Kepler 452b was completely uninhabited when our colony ships arrived. We've built cities, farms, factories there. Tens of thousands of humans now call it home. That planet belongs to us now by right of settlement. The chamber erupted into a deafening cacophony of hisses, screeches, and howls, alien leaders shaking appendages in outrage. Some demanded immediate nuclear bombardment of all human worlds in retribution. Alan felt a few pangs of fear, knowing humanity was hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned by the Galactic Council. One wrong move here could mean extinction for his entire species. As the alien leaders filed out of the chamber to deliberate humanity's fate in private, Alan paced the golden floor, sweat beading on his forehead. The Galactic Council held the power to wipe out his entire species with a single vote. He had to convince them Earth was blameless in settling Kepler 452b. Suddenly a slender hand grasped his wrist. Alan spun to see a young Iridian in flowing blue robes with smooth teal skin and wide eyes. "Commander Bell, a word, please. I am Zephyr, a junior diplomat in training. I may have information that can help your case," the Iridian whispered. Alan narrowed his eyes but nodded for Zephyr to continue. The Iridian glanced around before leaning in close. "My people have been secretly mining Kepler 452b for hundreds of years. The planet's core is honeycombed with tunnels. Quasar is lying about it being our ancestral territory. In truth, we've nearly stripped its resources bare. The Iridian Empire is desperate to boot your settlers off before the rest of the Council discovers our illegal operation." Alan's mind reeled at the revelation. He gripped Zephyr's narrow shoulders. "Can you prove any of this? Testimony from an Iridian could sway the Council in humanity's favor." Zephyr shook his head, eyes darting in fear. "Quasar would have me executed for treason, but I can give you the coordinates of our main mining complex on Kepler 452b. It's in the northern hemisphere, buried under a mountain range. You can scan it from orbit and present the evidence." Alan tapped the location into his wrist computer. "Why are you helping us? Won't you face punishment?" "I'm young, but I know this warmongering is wrong. Iridians are supposed to be diplomats, not conquerors. I can't let my people commit such injustice. Now hurry. The Council will return any moment. Remember, don't let them intimidate you into surrendering the colony." As Zephyr scurried away, Alan strode to the Council door and pushed it open, interrupting the deliberation. Quasar glared at him with pulsating eyes. "The human is not permitted to—" "I have evidence the Iridians have been illegally mining Kepler 452b. Alan projected an image of the sprawling tunnel complex from his wrist computer. Gasps echoed around the chamber. This planet was never their ancestral territory. It's just another world they want to exploit. But humanity got there first. Quasar shot from his bench, slamming his fists on the table. "Lies, the human is fabricating this to steal what is ours." "Is that so?" Alan enlarged an image showing Iridian mining equipment. "Then how do you explain this? I'm no geologist, but I'm pretty sure our settlers didn't bring industrial drills with them." Howls of outrage filled the room as alien representatives turned on Quasar. The Iridian trembled with rage. Suddenly, a blast of psychic energy erupted from his skull, hurtling towards Alan. The human was blown backwards, slamming into the far wall with a grunt of pain. "We will take Kepler 452b by force, then," Quasar roared. "No primitives from Earth will keep the Iridian Empire from what it desires." Alan pulled himself to his feet, ribs aching from the impact. He fixed Quasar with a cold stare that silenced the chamber. "If you come for our planet, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens when humanity is pushed too far." With that, Alan turned and marched from the council chamber, leaving the aliens stunned. Let them underestimate humans at their own peril. If it was a war the Iridians wanted, then war they would get. Back on Earth, Alan strode into the United Nations Security Council chamber, his boots echoing on the marble floor. The representatives turned to face him, some with hopeful expressions, others with grim resignation. Alan took his seat and cleared his throat. "We have no choice but to prepare for war," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "The Iridians' actions have left us with no other option. They lied about their claim to Kepler 452b and attacked me when I exposed their deception." A murmur rippled through the council. Some members nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads. "Surely there must be a diplomatic solution," said the representative from France. "War should always be a last resort." "The Iridians have made their intentions clear," Alan countered. "They will stop at nothing to take Kepler 452b, even if it means wiping out our colony. We must show them that we are not to be trifled with." He brought up a holographic display of Kepler 452b. "I propose we fortify the colony with additional defenses and send a fleet of warships to protect it. We cannot let the Iridians think they can bully us into submission." The council members exchanged glances, weighing the gravity of the situation. Finally, the representative from the United States spoke up. "Commander Bell is right. We cannot stand idly by while our people are threatened. I move that we mobilize the United Earth Defense Force and send them to Kepler 452b immediately." The motion was seconded, and after a brief debate, the council reluctantly agreed. Alan felt a sense of grim satisfaction as he left the chamber. The Iridians had started this fight, but humanity would finish it. As the UEDF fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 452b, Alan felt his stomach clench at the sight before him. A massive Iridian armada hung in space, their ships bristling with weapons. At the center of the formation was the Nebula, Quasar's flagship. It dwarfed the human vessels, its hull pulsing with malevolent energy. "All ships, hold position," Alan ordered from the bridge of the Odyssey. "Wait for the Iridians to make the first move. We don't want to give them any excuse to escalate this conflict." The human fleet drifted through space, engines idling as they faced off against their alien adversaries. The tension was palpable, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Suddenly, a barrage of plasma torpedoes erupted from the nebula, streaking towards the human ships. The Odyssey shuddered as the first salvo slammed into its shields. "Evasive maneuvers," Alan shouted. "All ships, return fire." The human fleet scattered, their own weapons blazing to life. Beams of searing energy lanced out from the UEDF ships, slicing into the Iridian vessels. The void lit up with explosions as the two sides exchanged fire in a dazzling display of destructive power. Alan gripped the arms of his command chair as the Odyssey rocked under another barrage. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the acrid scent of smoke filled the bridge. But even as his ship took a pounding, Alan felt a flicker of hope. The Iridians were hitting them hard, but the human ships were giving as good as they got. Their advanced shields and weapons, developed in secret over decades, were proving to be more than a match for the alien technology. As the battle raged on, Alan watched the tactical display with growing confidence. The Iridian ships were taking heavy damage, their formations falling into disarray. The human fleet, on the other hand, was holding strong. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they were fighting with a ferocity and determination that the Iridians had clearly underestimated. Target the nebula's engines, Alan ordered. Let's take out their flagship and send these bastards running. A volley of quantum torpedoes leapt from the Odyssey's launch tubes, racing towards the massive Iridian vessel. The nebula tried to evade, but the human weapons were too fast. They slammed into the ship's stern, ripping through its shields and tearing into the hull. Secondary explosions blossomed along the nebula's length as its engines went critical. "The nebula is disabled," the tactical officer reported. "The Iridian fleet is breaking off their attack." Alan watched with satisfaction as the alien ships turned tail and fled, leaving the crippled nebula behind. The human fleet had taken losses, but they had held the line. Kepler 452b was safe for now. But as the adrenaline of battle faded, Alan knew that this was only the beginning. The Iridians would be back, and they would not underestimate humanity again. The war for Kepler 452b, and perhaps for the fate of the entire galaxy, had just begun. On the bridge of the Odyssey, warning klaxons blared and red lights flashed. The ship rocked violently as another barrage of Iridian torpedoes slammed into the shields. "Shields at 20%, shouted the tactical officer. "We can't take much more of this." Alan gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. He watched on the view screen as the nebula loomed closer, its weapons glowing as it prepared for another volley. Suddenly, the Iridian flagship veered sharply, altering its course. Alan's eyes widened as he realized what Quasar was planning. "He's going to ram us," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "All hands brace for impact." The crew scrambled to secure themselves as the nebula hurtled towards the Odyssey. The two massive ships collided with a tremendous crash, the force of the impact throwing crew members from their seats. Sparks showered from overloaded consoles, and the stench of burning circuitry filled the air. On the nebula's bridge, Quasar was hurled from his command chair, slamming into a bulkhead with a sickening crunch. He staggered to his feet, his vision blurring as he stared out the view screen at the Odyssey. The human ship was battered and scarred, but it remained intact, pushing back against the nebula with a surge of its powerful engines. Quasar's eyes bulged in disbelief. How could the humans' primitive vessel withstand such a collision? He had underestimated their technology, their resilience. As if sensing his despair, the Odyssey opened fire, its weapons tearing into the nebula's weakened shields. Explosions blossomed along the Iridian ship's hull as it began to crack apart under the onslaught. Quasar's crew scrambled frantically to contain the damage, but it was too late. The once mighty flagship was coming apart at the seams. With a shaking hand, Quasar activated the comm system. "This is High Counselor Quasar of the Nebula," he said, his voice trembling. "We surrender. Please, show mercy." On the Odyssey's bridge, Alan allowed himself a small smile. "Accepted," he replied simply. He watched as escape pods began to jettison from the dying nebula, the remnants of the Iridian fleet turning to flee. The human ships let them go, their point made. Kepler 452b belonged to Earth now. As the adrenaline began to fade, Alan felt a swell of pride in his chest. Against all odds, humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with on the galactic stage, but even as he savored this victory, he knew that their struggle was far from over. The Iridians would not forget this humiliation, and there were countless other alien races out there, watching and waiting to see how this new power would act. The repercussions of this battle would echo across the stars, and Alan could only hope that humanity was ready for what came next. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a cacophony of voices erupted as representatives from myriad worlds argued and shouted. The battle over Kepler 452b had sent shockwaves rippling across the galaxy. "The humans must pay for their insolence," screeched a mantis-like creature, mandibles clacking. "Sanctions, reparations." "Caution, we must have caution," trilled a glowing orb, colors pulsing. "The Terrans are not to be trifled with." As the debate raged, Alan stepped up to the central podium, his face gaunt and shoulders heavy with exhaustion. The chamber fell silent as he began to speak. "I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a supplicant," he said, voice raw. In the heat of battle, the Iridians unleashed a biological weapon, a virus that even now ravages my people. A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the assembled delegates. Alan raised his hands for silence. Thousands of my soldiers, my friends, fight for their lives against this alien plague. I fear that if left unchecked, it may spread beyond Kepler 452b, beyond human space. He locked eyes with each counselor in turn, his gaze unflinching. I implore you, not for myself, but for the sake of all life. We need your help, your scientists, your knowledge. Together we must find a cure before it is too late. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly a willowy figure stood, her crystalline skin refracting the light. The Terrans speak wisdom, she said, her voice like chimes in the wind. This virus threatens us all. We must act, and act swiftly. Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd, building to a crescendo. The council speaker, an ancient being wreathed in a nebula of swirling gas, raised a gnarled appendage. The council has reached a decision, they intoned. Our finest minds shall aid the humans in their search for a cure. The virus must be contained and eradicated. As the session adjourned, Alan sagged against the podium, relief and gratitude etched in the lines of his face. A slender hand touched his shoulder, and he turned to see Zephyr, the young Iridian who had first warned him of Quasar's treachery. You have won a great victory today, Commander, Zephyr said, not just for your people, but for the principles of justice and compassion. Alan managed a weary smile. We could not have done it without your help, my friend. Humanity owes you a debt we can never repay. Zephyr's expression grew somber. And yet I fear that your trials are only beginning. The Iridians were but one power among many. Your actions have drawn the gaze of beings ancient and terrible. You must be cautious, Commander. The void is vast and full of teeth. With a final clasp of Alan's shoulder, Zephyr melted away into the dispersing crowd. Alan stood alone on the podium, staring out at the stars through the chamber's panoramic view screen. An invisible weight settled over him, the weight of responsibility, of the countless lives depending on him. He thought of his crew, his people, facing an uncertain future. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. He squared his shoulders and strode from the council chamber. It was time to return to the Odyssey, to the fight. Humanity's place in the galaxy was yet to be determined, and Alan would be damned if he let his people face the coming storm alone. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, I liked the story, and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.